Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So before I begin, we will discuss a few of the questions regarding the fasting. As I mentioned last night, some people are exempted from fasting. We mentioned those who are chronically ill or temporarily ill, and also those who are old men and women, and we do not know exactly what age. They say old. If you think you are old enough, some people get offended, if you tell them you are old. So it depends on you. If you think you are old and you cannot take it, you cannot bear the hunger or the thirst, then also old people are exempted from fast. Ta'al habibi. So, and then they have to pay the fidya. Fidya we mentioned for each day $4. For each day they purchase food and they give that food, which is 3/4 kilo of food, to the poor and the needy per day. Now those who do not fast, let's say those elderly who do not fast, the sick who do not fast, are they allowed to eat and drink in public during the days of Ramadan? Are they? They are not allowed. They are not allowed to eat or drink in public. They may eat and drink at home, but they are not allowed to eat and drink in public as a respect for the month of Ramadan. Even if they are unable to fast, but they are not allowed to eat or drink in public, especially in a Muslim community where people are observing the fast. The other thing, someone asked, is music and song, are they okay during the days of Ramadan to listen to music and song? I don't know. I don't know what to say. I think it's better not to listen to music and songs and replace them with the Holy Quran. This is a holy book. If you read one section of it, it has 30 sections. This book has 30 sections. So if you read one section per day, that would be 30 sections for the holy month, for the entire month, and then inshallah you benefit from that. You get inspired, you get rewarded by reading, or if you cannot read, then you may listen. You may play it on YouTube. There are many reciters with accurate, perfect recitation and a beautiful voice. So you may choose one and follow the reciter who recites the Quran, rather than listening to song and music during the days of Ramadan, because it takes the blessings away. It takes the spirituality away from you if you listen to it. Defeats the purpose. The purpose of fasting, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. You may attain righteousness and piety. And definitely some types of music and songs, they take piety away from you. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على أنبياء الله جميعا وعلى سيدهم وخاتمهم حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين، سيما سيدنا ومولانا الإمام الحجة بن الحسن المهدي المنتظر عجل الله تعالى فرجه وسهل مخرجه. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وَإِذْ تَقُولُ. This is verse number 37, chapter 33, Surah Al-Ahzab, the parties and verse 37. وَإِذْ تَقُولُ لِلَّذِي أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَأَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِ أَمْسِكْ عَلَيْكَ زَوْجَكَ وَاتَّقِ اللَّهِ وَتُخْفِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِيهِ وَتَخْشَى النَّاسَ وَاللَّهُ أَحَقُّ أَنْ تَخْشَاهُ فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِنْهَا وَطَرًا زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا لكي لا يكون على المؤمنين حرج في أزواج أدعيائهم إذا قضوا منهن وطرا وكان أمر الله مفعولا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. This verse is in regard to a very famous incident that took place during the life of the Prophet. And we decided during this month we will focus on the life and the tradition and the history of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the Holy Quran. There are plenty of verses that discuss the life of the Prophet. This is one of them. The marriage of the Prophet with a lady called Zaynab. It was a bit controversial. Why? Let me tell you who Zaynab was and what happened to her before she married the Prophet. Zaynab is the daughter of Maymuna bint Abd al-Muttalib. The Prophet had many uncles and aunts, parental uncles and aunts. One of those aunts' names is Zaynab. Zaynab bint Jahsh. Her mother is Maymuna. Maymuna is the aunt of the Prophet. So Zaynab becomes the Prophet's first cousin. And her husband Zayd was a slave. He was purchased by the wife of the Prophet, Khadija, the first wife of the Prophet. Assalamu alaikum. Before the Prophet becomes a prophet, because before his ministry and his mission and his bi'thah and his nubuwwah, his prophethood started at the age of 40, he was married to Khadija. At the age of 25, he was married. So he was married to Khadija. Khadija was a wealthy lady. She had a lot of money. At that time, those who are wealthy, they purchase slaves to serve them at their homes, at their farms, at their ranches. So Khadija purchased this man, his name is Zayd, from the market, and she gave it as a gift to the Prophet. Once the Prophet received him as a gift, he freed him, set him free, released him from slavery and captivity. So when he released him, the father of Zayd knew that his son now is free. He has been freed by the Prophet. He's a free man. He's no longer a slave. So he came to Mecca to see his son and to take him back home. But when he came and he found Zayd living in the house of the Prophet and he enjoyed the treatment there, the Prophet was very affectionate, compassionate to him. The son refused to go back with his father. He said, no, I am much more comfortable here with Muhammad. At that time was not a prophet. He said, with Muhammad, he wasn't prophet yet. I am happy with him and I don't want to come with you home. So the father got angry and he disavowed his son, disavowed Zayd. And he left him, went back home. So Zayd became the adopted son of the Prophet. And they used to call him Zayd ibn Muhammad. Gave him the adopted name, Zayd, the son of Muhammad. This was his name at that time. And until the Prophet became a prophet at the age of 40, and the Quran came and said, ما كان محمد أبا أحد من رجالكم ولكن رسول الله وخاتم النبيين. Muhammad is not the biological father of any one of you. Yes, he's a spiritual father. The Christians called Jesus, what do they call him? Father. But he's not the biological father. Spiritual father, yes. Prophet Muhammad says to Imam Ali, he says, أنا وعلي أبوا هذه الأمة. Me and Ali ibn Abi Talib, we are the spiritual fathers of this nation, of the Islamic nation. So our spiritual father is a Prophet Muhammad and Imam Ali, but he's not the biological father. And God asked the Muslims who have adopted sons not to call them by their name, but to call them by the name of their biological fathers. أُدْعُوهُمْ لِآبَائِهِمْ. So if you have a son, you raise this son in your home who's not your biological son. You've taken this son from an orphanage, or this daughter from an orphanage. She's not your biological daughter. He's not your biological son. You are not allowed to change his name and give him your own name. You are not. They have to recognize their own parents, biological parents. You cannot mislead any son, any daughter, and tell him, yes, I'm your mother, I'm your father. No. You have to tell them about their own true parents, biological parents. It's okay if they call you father or mother. It's okay. It's okay. But they have to know that. They have to know their biological parents. Don't mislead them. So in that case, the Prophet said to him, you don't call, your name is not Zayd ibn Muhammad. You are the Zayd ibn Haritha. Your father, his name is Haritha. So, and then the Prophet tried to find him a wife. It was difficult for someone who previously used to be a slave to find a wife in Mecca. Why? Because the Meccans, the idol worshippers of Mecca, the polytheists of Mecca, they were very racist. They would not give their daughters to someone who previously, even though he has been freed now, he's a free man, he's no longer a slave, but because at some point in his life was a slave, they would not give their daughters to him. It was difficult for him to find a wife. Though he's raised in the house of the Prophet, and now the Prophet is a prophet. This is after the Prophet started his mission. He's a messenger of God. But they would not give him. So the Prophet felt sorry for Zayd. And the Prophet had this first cousin, Zaynab bin Jahsh. So he asked her. And at that time there was no dating apps like today. Today your job is much easier. You install the app tonight and tomorrow you get married. But this was not the case at that time. And there was no dating. And marriage was an adventure. You see the wife for the first time. She's your wife. You see her face. You talk to her the night of the wedding. The night of the wedding. It's really an adventure. And it's up to your luck. If you are lucky, you get along with her and you live with her. So they don't speak before marriage. They don't communicate. They don't even know each other. Maybe they know each other's families, but not personally. They don't know each other. They don't go on a date. So it was a big adventure. It was a big risk. So when the Prophet approached his first cousin to ask her to marry Zayd, there was some confusion in the beginning. She thought that the Prophet is approaching her to marry her. There was some misunderstanding. So she was so excited that the Prophet is marrying her. But soon afterwards she found out, no, it's not the Prophet himself. He's asking for her hand for Zayd, not himself. So she was saddened. She was shocked. She said to the Prophet, first, I thought you are marrying me. So I don't want to marry Zayd. But the Prophet convinced her. And out of respect for the Prophet, because he's the messenger of God. And then the Quran says, you have to obey the Prophet. One of the rules is to obey the Prophet. مَا آتَاكُمُ الرَّسُولُ فَخُذُوهُ. When the Prophet asks you to do something, do it out of respect. وما كان لمؤمن ولا مؤمنة إذا قضى الله ورسوله أمرا أن يكون لهم الخيارة من أمرهم. When God gives a decree or a command asking you to do something through His messenger, through His prophet, then listen. You don't have a choice but to listen. So out of respect for the prophet and out of respect for God, she accepted. But she accepted reluctantly. Reluctantly. She was not convinced. And she married him. But this marriage had many problems. Some commentators believe because they were not a match, they were not compatible. He comes from a family which was poor. Zaynab comes from a family which was rich and famous and influential. So there was some gap between them. This is one reason. The other reason, it could be the manners of Zayd. His manners. It could be. He did not treat her well. So there were arguments between them. Though the Prophet he was the one who blessed this marriage. He was the one who officiated this marriage. He himself. And it came at the command of God, but it didn't work. Did not work. And this happens in many marriages. Sometimes the husband is good and the wife is good. Both of them are good. Nothing wrong with them. But the relationship does not work out. Relationship is not compatible. Their personality, their character is not compatible with each other. Doesn't mean that both of them are evil or even one of them is evil. No. Sometimes when I do marriage counseling, both of them are good human being, good human being. But that marriage does not work out. Doesn't work out. There is no match, no compatibility between them. And God says marriage is about compatibility. وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. In marriage, there should be affection and love and respect and care and understanding. If these things are missing from the marriage, that marriage is not going to be a healthy one. It's not going to work out. They are not going to get along well. So they used to come to the Prophet when they have arguments. He comes to the Prophet tells him, be patient, Zayd, be patient. Be patient. Maybe Zaynab today, she doesn't like you, but slowly, when she gets to know you very well, she starts liking you. أَمْسِكْ عَلَيْكَ زَوْجَكَ وَاتَّقِ اللَّهِ. The Prophet used to tell him, keep her, maintain this marriage and maintain this wife and retain your wife and reverence God. وَاتَّقِ اللَّهِ. Fear God. But the problems continued until one day Zaynab said, I am not going to continue my life with Zayd. The Prophet felt very sorry because he found himself to be responsible. He was the one who convinced his first cousin Zaynab to marry Zayd. He went after her. He asked for her hand. He encouraged her. He insisted on her. And she accepted Zayd out of respect for the Prophet, not because she loved Zayd. And this is what we do sometimes in some societies, not in America anymore, no. In some countries back home, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Iran, Iraq, some people, they marry to please their parents, to please their fathers, their mothers, not to please themselves. She has no choice. Sometimes the woman has no choice. Sometimes the man has no choice. His mother insists on him. His father insists on him to marry this person, to marry first cousin, to marry a friend's daughter. So unfortunately, this is something that's still happening. And most of the time, it ends up in disasters. My humble advice to the young generation, follow what the Prophet himself said. What the Prophet himself said. He said, Someone comes to Imam al-Sadiq and he says to him, Yabna Rasulullah, O the son of the Prophet, I love someone and my father loves someone else. He wants me to marry someone else. Who should I listen to? Imam says, listen to yourself. Marry the one you love and leave the one that your father loves. Because this is your life. This is your future. And if you are not in love with that person, you cannot live with that person. No living without loving. No living without a mutual understanding. So parents should not pressure their kids. Yes, you may guide them, you may advise them. You know, we have this responsibility of advising them, counseling them, guiding them, but not pressuring them, not coercing them into marrying someone that they don't love, because that marriage is not going to work. And this is what happened to the marriage of Zayd and Zaynab. It ended in divorce. And the Prophet felt sorry. And when Zayd divorced his wife, the Prophet wanted to offset Zaynab's pain and suffering. And he wanted to compensate her because he found himself to be the reason for her failed marriage. Because he was the one who convinced her. And he convinced her, of course, out of goodwill. Out of goodwill. But subhanallah, sometimes it does not work. Let me tell you something. I ask people who are getting divorced sometimes. I tell them, but how did you get to marry this person, you know? Now you are telling me all the bad things about him or her. All the bad things in the English vocabulary, they use it. All the ills, all the deficiencies. They say, but Fulan Maulana, he did the wedding for us. So what does it mean? If Fulan Sayyid or leader or Maulana did, it means your marriage will be safe for the next 500 years? No. A marriage was done by the Prophet himself. The Prophet officiated the marriage and that marriage failed. It is your responsibility. You have a responsibility. If it is not a match, if there is no compatibility, then that marriage, it doesn't matter who officiated that marriage. It's going to fail. It's going to fail. Or some people say, but I did istikhara. I did istikhara. So what? You shouldn't do istikhara. Many people, they misuse the istikhara. They don't do their homework. They don't investigate. They don't research. They don't ask. As soon as they see someone, they take istikhara. If the istikhara is good, istikhara is like gambling. We misuse it. We treat it as gambling. Istikhara is not for this case. Istikhara, it means it has conditions. That you investigate thoroughly. You investigate that person. The person that you want to marry, the person who's asking for your hand, you investigate him or her thoroughly, extensively. Like the FBI, even worse than FBI. You investigate everything about their life. You don't go blindly. You ask about their history. You ask their friends. And once you've done your homework and you are still hesitant, then you may take an istikhara. But if you are convinced, then don't take istikhara. Leave the istikhara. Don't misuse the istikhara. If you misuse the istikhara is going to give you the wrong result, not the right result. Don't misuse the istikhara. Take your time into understanding that person and his or her character. Take your time. I say in this country, when we want to buy a car, how long it takes us to buy a car? No, not 20 minutes, no. No. How long it takes you to research about a car? Yes, purchasing it is an hour, but how long it takes you to find a good car? Huh? Select a car. You select. You don't buy. You go, you invest, you ask. We have an expert here, Ali Muhammadi. I asked him when I purchased the car. Took me 2, 3, 4 weeks. How much it takes you to buy a house? Many months. to find the right house. You don't purchase any property. You look for the neighborhood, the zip code, the neighbors, the price, the structure, the age of the house, the rooms, the size, everything takes you time. So why, when it comes to marriage, some people fall in love in 2 minutes? This is wrong. This is wrong. It's wrong. Yes, we encourage you to get married, but we want you to get the right marriage, not the wrong marriage. Make the right choice, not the wrong choice. So the Prophet, he decided that if Zayd divorces Zaynab, I am going to marry her as a compensation for her loss and for her suffering. And this is what God says in the Quran. فَلَمَّا وَإِذْ تَقُولُ, once you say, meaning Muhammad, you say, Ya Rasulullah, you say, لِلَّذِي أَنْعَمَ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَأَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِ, to the one which is Zayd, that God blessed him. Blessed him through what? No. God blessed him through Iman. He was not a mu'min, he was not a believer, he was not a Muslim, he became a Muslim. So God blessed him with faith. وَأَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِ, you too blessed him. How did the Prophet bless him? How did the Prophet bless him? Not marriage. Freeing him from slavery. Freeing him. So God blessed him through faith, guiding him to faith. And Prophet Muhammad blessed him, أَنْعَمْتَ عَلَيْهِ, through freeing him from being a slave. What do you say to him? أَمْسِكْ عَلَيْكَ زَوْجَكَ. The Prophet used to counsel them. The Prophet used to sit in the mosque and he did marriage counseling for so many people. So he would tell him, retain your wife, don't divorce her, be patient. Maybe things will change in the future. أَمْسِكْ عَلَيْكَ زَوْجَكَ وَاتَّقِ اللَّهِ, and reverence God. وَتُخْفِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِيهِ. When Zayd and Zaynab insisted on separating, they said there is no future between us. The Prophet here concealed in his self. He didn't share this idea with anyone. He concealed in his self. What did he conceal? وَتُخْفِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِيهِ. What is the translation? You are hiding in yourself what God was to disclose. What was the Prophet hiding in himself? Which idea? Help me out, please. The marriage of Zaynab once she gets divorced. And what is the one that God is disclosing and making it public? What God is making it public was a new ruling. The new ruling is, if you are a father and you have an adopted son, not biological son, adopted son, and this son is married to a lady, and then this marriage ends up in divorce, the lady is divorced from your adopted son, can you marry this lady, you as a father, or you cannot? In the past they couldn't, but God made it lawful. You can marry her. Why? Because she's the wife of your adopted son, not biological son. You cannot marry the wife of your biological son if she gets married. Neither a son can marry the wife of his father. The wife of his father, suppose your father, biological father, had a second wife, third wife, and your father divorces her. Can you marry her? No, because this is your biological father. So God was going to disclose this new and introduce this new ruling. وَتُخْفِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِيهِ وَتَخْشَى النَّاسَ وَاللَّهُ أَحَقُّ أَن تَخْشَاهُ. And you fear the rumors, because at that time they would not marry the wives of their adopted sons. And the Prophet was sensitive. And he feared the rumors. People are going to speak against him. They're going to say, see Muhammad, see what he did? He married the wife of his son. So he didn't want to do that. He was fearful of the backlash in the community against him. So God is saying to him, God is more appropriate to fear him. Do not fear the people. In every aspect of our life, if there is a conflict between people and God, who do we put first? We're supposed to put God. But do you think most people put God first? Most people put people first. They don't put God first. This is a lesson for us. True faith means when there is a conflict between God and my parents, God and my children, God and my friends, God and people, God and government, I put God. I have to fear God. It's more appropriate to fear God, not to fear people. Because sometimes people, whatever you do, they're going to speak against you. Whatever you do. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, رِضَى النَّاسِ غَايَةٌ لَا تُدْرَكْ. To please all the people of the community, to be happy with you and radhi, rida, to be happy with you and to accept you, this is impossible to happen. It would never happen. It would never happen. There are always some people here and there who are against you, no matter what you do. You would never be able to please them. So in this case, please God. Try to please God. Put God first. وَتُخْفِي فِي نَفْسِكَ مَا اللَّهُ مُبْدِيهِ وَتَخْشَى النَّاسَ وَاللَّهُ أَحَقُّ أَن تَخْشَاهُ فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِنْهَا وَطَرًا. When Zayd relinquished his claim upon Zaynab. What does it mean? Relinquished his claim upon Zaynab. He divorced her. He divorced her. There is no more life between them. There is no more future between them. That's it. They came to a standstill, cul-de-sac, and there is no way out. So in this case, فَلَمَّا قَضَى زَيْدٌ مِنْهَا وَطَرًا زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا. زَوَّجْنَاكَهَا. We wed you. We wed her to you. God says, I am marrying you to her. Amazing. God is officiating the marriage. This is why Zaynab, when the Prophet married her, she would brag always and tell the rest of the wives of the Prophet that your parents gave you in marriage to the Prophet, but for me, God gave me in marriage to the Prophet. And this is true. That is the first incident where God officiated the wedding. What was the second incident of a marriage officiated by God? Imam Ali and Fatima al-Zahra, the same thing. The one who officiated their wedding, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, إذا قضوا منهن وطرا. فلما قضى زيد منها وطرا. When Zayd relinquished his claim upon Zaynab, we wed her to you. زوجناكها لكي لا يكون على المؤمنين حرج في أزواج أدعيائهم إذا قضوا منهن وطرا. So that should not be a restriction in respect to the wives of the people of their adopted sons. They have no restrictions. If, let's say, if an adopted father, a father who's adopting a son, and that son had a wife, and then he divorces his wife, then there is no restriction upon the father to marry that wife, to take care of her, to shelter her. Because she is not the wife of his biological son. She is the wife of his adopted son. And there is a difference between them. And this tells you something else. Does an adopted son or daughter or children become exactly the same like your biological children? Impossible. Even if you are the best mother in the whole world and the best father in the whole world, deep inside you, there is some distinction between your biological descendant children and your adopted children. Because the love for your biological children is what? Natural. Whether you like it or not. Whether you like it or not. You love your biological children, any grandchildren. But when it comes to the adopted ones, it's not natural. You have to exert pressure. You have to fight sometimes. Fight to get to love them. Because they are not your biological children. There is a difference. There is an emotional and psychological difference between these two types of children. They are not exactly the same. And this is why, my friends, in this book, the Holy Quran, always God asks children to take care of their parents. Always, always, always. وَقَضَى رَبُّكَ أَلَّا تَعْبُدُوا إِلَّا إِيَّاهُ وَبِالْوَالِدَيْنِ إِحْسَانًا إِمَّا يَبْلُغَنَّ عِنْدَكَ الْكِبَرَ أَحَدُهُمَا أَوْ كِلَاهُمَا فَلَا تَقُلْ لَهُمَا أُفٍّ. Many places in this book, God says, oh children, respect your parents, be dutiful to your parents, take care of your parents. But never ever in this book God says, parents, take care of your children. Why? Why? It's natural. I don't want someone to remind me. It's in my blood. It's in my cell to take care of, in my cells to take care of my children. Natural. There is no need to remind a mother to take care of her son or a father to take care of his children. Of course, some of them, they, unfortunately, when the conscience is dead, we were talking in the car now with Haj Samir. We have something inside called conscience, dhamir. In Farsi, wujdan. In Arabic, dhamir. In English, conscience. When this conscience is dead, you may do any terrible sin and a crime and violation. You may abandon your family, abandon your biological children, hurt your wife, hurt your parents, hurt your mother sometimes. Haj Samir was telling me in the car, we were driving now, he said someone, somewhere, he stole millions of dollars from his own parents, biological parents. His own. Can you imagine someone steals money from his own mother? Yes, it happens. Why? Because the conscience is dead. No more conscience. And therefore, the Prophet married her because God officiated the wedding. And in conclusion, here, وَكَانَ أَمْرُ اللَّهِ مَفْعُولًا. The command of God has to be fulfilled. The decree of God is determined. Follow God. Do not follow the customs and the traditions of your own society, of your own tribe. Follow the commands of God. Do not be fearful of what people are going to say about you. If you are doing the right thing, you should not fear. You should not fear anyone. Only fear God. And therefore here, the Prophet married Zaynab because God wed them. He did the wedding for them in the Islamic calendar. Which year is it now? 1446. So how many years ago? 1441 years ago. 1441 years ago. What year we started Ramadan in this mosque in Orange County? How many years ago? Black. So alhamdulillah, we give thanks to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every day we live, because she had the dream of marrying the Prophet. Sometimes it changes to the better most of the time, and sometimes it becomes even worse. And it all depends on us. It's following to them. And I'm going to speak, inshallah, in the next few nights about how the Prophet treated his wives, because we don't know much about the Prophet's internal life. We know much about his external life. His relationship with the companions, as a political leader, religious leader, as a prophet, but we don't know much about his home, what was going on inside his home. But there are some verses in this book, the Holy Quran, it tells you exactly what was happening inside the home of the Prophet. and how he treated his wives, his children, and we have to know these things. These are, in every step he did, there is a lesson. There is an inspirational lesson for us. The internal wife, the marital life of the prophet is very teaching, very telling. And inshallah, I'm going to spend a few nights speaking about the prophet's marital life. So one day the prophet was sitting with his other wives, group of them. He said to them, أسرعكن لحوقا بي أطولكن يدا. The first one who's going to be reunited with me after death, when I die, the first one who's going to die after me is the one who has the longest hand. So all of them, they took, they rolled up their sleeves and they were measuring their arms. But it is a metaphor. This is a metaphor. A person who has a long hand, it's a metaphor in the Arabic culture, a reference to what? Generosity. Meaning his hand reaches out to people in goodness. He helps people out. His hands all over. Not to strike, not to abuse, but to give, to help, to hold the hands of others. So in Arabic, when they want to say someone is benevolent and generous and kind, they say he has a long hand or long arm. So all of them, they started, sizing and measuring their arms, but the Prophet said, no, this is not what I meant. I meant the one who is most generous among you and the most kind is going to join me after my death. She will be the fastest one to join me. And guess who was the fastest wife who joined the Prophet after his death? No, Khadija died in Mecca. I think when you don't have coffee, it, creates some confusion. So Khadija died in Mecca. The Prophet married her for 28 years. And she died on the 10th of Ramadan. And inshallah, on the 10th of Ramadan, I am going to speak about his first wife, Khadija. So this is Zaynab. When the Prophet was in Mecca, he had only one wife. Only one wife. The rest of them, he married them later on when he came to Medina. And he was 53 years old when he married other wives. He wasn't young. And it was not because of sexual urge, no. He was 53. Because when he was very young, he had only one wife. Now he's 53, he had multiple wives. Why? It has a reason. I'm going to tell you about the reason maybe tomorrow or after tomorrow or Wednesday or Thursday. So, stay tuned. Come every night so you hear these good stories. Though inshallah, said Muhammad, who came from Najaf last week, he's studying at the seminary, he's going to speak, inshallah, here too. So the Prophet married them at the age of 53, and there are reasons, and I'm going to tell you about the reasons. So Zaynab was the first wife. The first member of the family of the Prophet was Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, who joined her father after his death at the age of 18. The first member. But the first wife was Zaynab, who joined the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as I said, أطولكن يدا, because she used to give sadaqah and charity. Whatever she gets from the Prophet, she donates this money, this food, this clothing, and she give it as a charity. اللهم اغفر للمؤمنين والمؤمنات والمسلمين والمسلمات الأحياء منهم والأموات تابع اللهم بيننا وبينهم بالخيرات. Oh Allah, accept our fasting, our prayers, our supplications and du'as during the holy days and nights of this month, and unite the hearts and the minds of the believers and the Muslims worldwide, and hasten the return of our leader, our Imam, Al-Imam Al-Mahdi Al-Muntadhar, Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu Al-Sharif, and for the soul of all the martyrs worldwide. Al-Fatiha ma'as salati ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Inshallah, we see you tomorrow at 7:32. Tomorrow, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 7:30, and then Thursday we go back to 6 p.m. or 6 something for the iftar. We have a 3 nights iftar, Thursdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, and 4 nights without iftar. And inshallah, we see you every night. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.